It's not happening to you, it's happening for you. And that's why I love working with the body, because it's just based on how we feel. We don't have to overanalyze it. We don't have to fix anything. We get to listen and learn to allow that energy that wants to heal, wants to create, wants the best for us.
Welcome to Unfinished Stories Next Chapter, the podcast where we embrace the beauty of finishing the things that we started. I'm your host, Stephanie Essery. I'm a writer who has spent decades creating stories that I never had the confidence to share with the world. I was convinced that I just wasn't good enough, or maybe it was just too late. Now I'm 54 years old, that's 42 years after writing my first story. I'm finally stepping into the world of publishing, and I want to take all of you along with me. Along the way, we're also going to be exploring the journeys and stories of others who thought they had missed their chance, but who ultimately found the strength to rewrite their future. We'll hear from experts who will help us navigate all of the changes, and I'll be sharing all of my own experiences, every triumph, every setback, and every lesson learned as I work towards becoming a debut author. Because I believe that the past does not define us, our next chapter does. So whether you're picking up the pen for the first time or you're reclaiming a dream that you set aside a long time ago, you're not alone. We're going to be turning that page together. This is Unfinished Stories Next Chapter, because the story isn't over until we say it is. Hey, my friends, welcome back to Unfinished Stories Next Chapter. Today's guest is Loren Cellentani, a somatic success mentor and the host of the Sovereign Self Show, a podcast that is ranked in the top 2% globally. After overcoming crippling anxiety, burnout, and a health crisis, Loren transformed her life through somatic energy work and spiritual mastery. Today, with over a decade of coaching experience, she helps light worker women turn anxiety into confidence, amplify their magnetism, and create impact and income in their soul-led business. Loren, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you. I'm so excited to be here and really touch on why your body is such a crucial part of your creative process. Not only spirituality, but all of the ideas, the inspired actions, and creativity lives inside of you. So I feel like this is going to be a really good day to deep dive into all of that.
Yeah, I'm really interested in as well, because I know a lot of times our body gets us stuck with where we are. I think our mind has a big impact on our ability to move forward and accomplish the things that we want to accomplish, but then our body, that's a whole nother story in itself. So I would love to delve into your story personally and how you ended up exactly where you are today.
Yeah, so Cliff Notes version of this. I started my journey of questioning during my college graduation of my first panic attack during the whole ceremony. I'm about to walk on stage. I'd done everything right up until that point, gotten the good grades, was in a good school, had a job lined up, and it was like my reality was collapsing in on me. I didn't realize it at the time that I was created and was living a life that wasn't mine. And I really felt a victim to my body. Anybody who's listening who has had anxiety or chronic anxiety, panic attacks, to know it's like you feel like your body is sabotaging you, and you feel like you're just the bystander in this. So that's not a fun way to live.
No.
So it got me questioning, okay, what the heck? So I started going the healthy route, started eating healthier. Eventually I started moving my body. I was so anxious I couldn't even go to a yoga class because I was, just the fear of, oh, what if I didn't know the next pose? So I have so much compassion for people who have anxiety in their lives. And then, it got to the point where I was getting really healthy. I became a health coach. I was helping other people with their health and their bodies. And then, of course, the story's not over. I found myself in the middle of divorce and really questioning, as much as these things happen in our lives, we want to point the fingers at other people, having to take responsibility. How did I wind up here? Yes, the panic attacks are gone, but my same energy of how I was thinking, how I was living my life was still there. And at that point, I was having a lot of different chronic health issues around my hormones and my uterus, chronic yeast infection, UTIs. It was like my body was literally screaming at me that whole relationship to leave. And I wasn't listening. And it was just like, I was like, come on, body, get it together. Can we just be happy? The judgment and the shame and the anger. But as soon as I ended up leaving that relationship, my body and never heading into symptoms again. My body completely healed. And then fast forward a few years, I'm still on this journey. This is all my 20s. And then, I'm starting to realize, oh, I can help people with this anxiety thing that I was going through, more the spiritual realm, the creativity. But I was scared. I was scared to really put myself out there, to really share my message, to really own what I wanted to create and help other people with. If anybody can relate to that, I'm sure if you're listening to this
I think
story.
many of us can.
Yes. And once again, I received a diagnosis. I had precancerous cells in my uterus, and I was like, what the actual F? It was a big surprise. I was super healthy, but at the same time, I knew I was living in all that fear, right? And my body, hello, uterus, that's how we birth things, whether it's a human or idea. As a woman, we're literally this like portal for creation and men too, but it's easier to explain it as a woman. And so I really started to take that seriously and dove deep into spiritual practices with working with my body, with somatic practices, which we'll talk about, which just means somatic. The root word for it is soma, which means body. Breathwork practices, because that's the one thing that comes with us our entire life is our breath. And I was really able to learn to harness the power of my body, harness the power of the anxiety to help feel better, number one, get my body healthy and glowing, and transmute all of that fear and all of those emotions into that creative energy, into the confidence, into the clarity to consistently show up as who I knew I already was. But it was like I was holding myself back, as so many of us can relate to. And my podcast, the theme of it, and probably my life's motto, is your body and emotions are not in the way, they're leading the way. And as you guys can tell by that very bridge story, it doesn't matter if it's a divorce, a diagnosis, panic attacks, whatever it is, it's all guiding you to take a different look at yourself from a different perspective that you wouldn't have already seen. It's not happening to you, it's happening for you. And that's why I love working with the body, because it's just based on how we feel. We don't have to overanalyze it. We don't have to fix anything. We get to listen and learn to allow that energy that wants to heal, it wants to create, it wants the best for us. And I'm just so excited to dive into anywhere you want to go from here.
That's good. And I wanted to touch a little bit more on the panic attacks because I do think like our bodies, and this is just learned over many years, but our bodies do a really beautiful job of telling us when something's wrong. And they often tell us before our brain is ready to recognize it, and especially before we're ready to have that conversation about what's going on and what's led to our body retaliating in the way that it does. And I think it's very difficult for people that have I had severe panic disorder, especially when I was younger. And when our bodies are constantly in that fight and flight mode, we're so focused on trying to control that, control our environment, control our thoughts, that it takes us a while, at least a tip for me, it takes us a while to be able to sit down and have that conversation as to why we're feeling this way. What was the catalyst? What is causing it? And do you find when you're working with people that it is a very difficult it's difficult to get them to the point where they're recognizing what's led to that. And before you can control it or before you can work through it, you have to be able to at least identify some of the things, correct?
Yeah, I think for me, the number one thing, when I was on the verge of panic attacks, and even today, alternate nostril breathing. It's a very simple thing.
Huh.
Yeah.
I think most of us, I know myself, it's hard to breathe as it is sometimes in this moment.
Exactly.
So tell me a little bit about alternate. Is it putting your finger to your
So
nostril? How does that
yeah,
work?
you can do it with it's a yogic breath, but you can do it with your fingers or not. I worked in corporate America for over a decade. So I'd be in the middle of a meeting with a bunch of people and I'd start having a panic attack. I felt claustrophobic. You guys know it's a building. I can't leave. And so what this does is you hit the nail on the head. It's learning to remember the power of your own focus, even in those moments that you feel like you have no control. So when we can focus on something as simple as our breath, because the first thing you notice when you have the anxiety and a panic attack, the short breath, you can't
Yes.
catch your breath, right? You can. I promise you. I promise you. And it's something that you can practice, but it's so easy. You can do it in the middle of a meeting. Inhale slowly through the right side of your nostril, and I visualized it going up through my brain. Pause. Exhale out the left side. Inhale up the left side, up to your brain, and exhale at the right side. And you keep doing that. So it's this beautiful loop. And what it actually does is it helps balance the two hemispheres of your brain and calms you down. Most importantly, calms you down. So when you are constantly in fight or flight, like what we're talking about, the panic attack is just a symptom of continually being in this stressed out state. So in the moment like that and proactively, consciously doing those kind of practices, that we literally are practicing what it feels like to calm down. We are practicing the power of our focus in those moments because we are way more powerful than we give ourselves credit for. And I think anxiety and panic attacks are such a beautiful example of an opportunity for us to really learn that about ourselves. And people probably think I'm crazy, but we're traveling full time, my partner and he and I do cold plunges every morning. We're in South Carolina and the ocean's pretty cold right now. And the reason I do that is because you jump into cold water and your body wants to go into that shock. But when I can practice that focus at a deeper level and calm my breath down, slow it down, very slow inhales and exhales, just like the alternate nostril breathing, I'm training my brain, I'm training my body, no matter what kind of stress that I may be in, that I can adapt to anything, that I don't have to go into that fear-based response or the survival-based response. So if people are like, why are crazy people jumping in cold water? Why is this so popular? First of all, you feel freaking amazing, but you're really building that stress response. And if I will say with a caveat, if you're the person who has chronic anxiety and panic attacks, start slowly if you want to do that, because that's too much.
In.
Yeah.
I have so when I started having panic attacks, one of the things that of course it sends you to the heart doctor quite often.
Yeah, yes,
because you think you're going to die, you think this
Yep.
is a heart attack. And I met my wonderful cardiologist back in Houston. He gave me a trick and it worked wonders, and it's along the same lines, but he splashed cold water in your face.
Yes.
Or put ice on your pulse points. And I can remember for a while I was having them so often, I would carry around the cold kind of a jug of water or a little thing of water. And like when I was riding my bike or if I was in a stressful situation, and I'd take it out and I'd splash it in my face. And my husband would like, that looks crazy. And I'm sure people felt that. But the way he explained it, and he did it in a very scientifically way, was it resets that nervous system. It
Yes.
reminds your body, hey, everything's okay. And then you take this sudden breath and you're able to reset. And so I'm sure that kind of cold plunging is along the same lines in a much more dramatic fashion. And I've read the benefits of it. I've considered it, but I hate cold. I just haven't been able to get there yet. So yes, it does work wonders. It really is a quick fix to tell our bodies, hold on, chill for a moment. We have this.
And you can do, just a little side note, splash some water and or get a bucket of or a bowl of water, put ice in it, and use it just on your hands or just your feet. Or I do it with my face because it's really good for your skin and anti-aging. That's a great place to start. And it helps reset your vagus nerve. It helps relax you, just like you said. There's lots of scientific information, but there's so many ways to do it, just like you explained.
Yes, and I think that's kind of it. Before, for me, breath work was really difficult. And it's this thing where we do the moment we're born. It's something that comes naturally, or so we think. But in those moments where we're very fearful, or at least our bodies are telling us that we are, our minds are telling our bodies, and then we're reacting this way, that's the first thing we forget to do is breathe. And I had such a difficult time with it. And I learned over time, but it had to become a practice. I had to teach myself to remember to breathe in these situations. And it's not as easy as you would think it would be. And now it is. Now I can identify when I'm starting to feel that way. I can feel them coming on. But certainly in my 20s, it was one of the most difficult periods of my life because they would come out of nowhere. And I had a very difficult time just stopping it.
Mm-hmm. Yes. I have so much compassion because I can totally relate to those moments. And again, That's part of my mission, is like everything, including those lovely panic attacks, are here helping us to grow, because without that contrast, you wouldn't have learned about the ice water splash. You wouldn't have grown in learning to practice breath work and all the other beautiful things we probably don't even realize how it's impacted our life in a positive way. And I think that, for me, that's the motto. Your body's leading the way. It's even the crap you don't like about your body and the anxiety, that's actually guiding you towards your growth.
And so your core message is really that the body is not the obstacle, but that is the path to your success. So can you explain to us how somatic practices really can help people connect with their power and their purpose?
Yeah. So people probably heard get out of your mind into your body, the runner's bliss, yogi or runner's high or yogi's bliss. We probably experienced some type of that trance-like state. You're literally shifting your brainwave state out of more stress-related response into a more focused. And why I love working with the body, especially if we're very active or prone to anxiety, perfectionist, overachiever energy. I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that as well. Sometimes that meditation or even just breath work feels really out of reach. When we can start to do easy practices of just moving our bodies, like the simple practice of just shaking and jumping, animals do that in the wild. If you look at a prey animal who's being chased, as soon as they're done being chased and they survive, okay, and they're safe, you'll even see your dog do this. They shake. They literally shake the stress out of their system. And as humans, we don't normally do that. So simple practices like this to let go of the stress, let go of the thoughts, because there is scientific research done. An emotion lasts less than a minute, okay? Less than a minute. Anything more than that, we are recreating the story in our head by how we think. I know sometimes people are like, oh, really? Are you sure? Yes. So when we can pause, just pause for a few moments, those stories, those loops, those fears, even though they seem real, even though they might seem justified, by something as simple as shaking and jumping our body, we're not only getting out of our heads, getting into our bodies, we are getting our lymph nodes, our lymph system starting to react and starting to detox and help our body in that way. But we're able to see things from a different perspective. And here's what I love about how this is helpful for creatives or people who have businesses, is that when we have to go, let's say, go on a podcast, create new content or whatever you're trying to do, when you do it, when you're stuck in the state of fear, or if you're stuck in this, ugh, I gotta go make another social media post, or I've got whatever the go-to emotion is, well, you're only going to be able to create, you're only going to be able to share from that level. So what does that look like? Maybe the lack of comments, the lack of new clients, the lack of money. It's going to keep continuing that if you are going to be creating in that same energy. So if you just take the shaking example, before you have to go do a podcast or create a post or write an email or whatever you do, or even create artwork, take a few minutes, whatever practice is great for you, to get in your body, shake it off. And what it does is we're able to see different perspectives than we would otherwise. We're able to shift into a solution mindset versus we're just so focused on solving the problem. We're having to fix the problem. And Einstein said the same level of consciousness that created a problem, you can't solve it from that level of consciousness. And I just botched that quote, but you guys understand what I'm saying here. We got to be able to shift our own selves. If we want to see different results, we got to change. When we're able to do the somatic practices, which is just moving our body, we feel better. We're going to see different perspectives. We're going to be more creative. From a physical level, we're turning on systems and detoxing our bodies. But from a spiritual level and an energetic level, all of that creative life force energy where I'd hinted towards at the beginning of this episode is being activated. We're literally tuning into our bodies, our womb space, our sacral chakra energy whether you believe it or not, as a woman, we have these womb spaces that can birth babies, but also you can harness that power in birthing whatever you want to create into the world. So I went whole around the spot there, but that's why I love somatic practices.
I get it. And I think a funny story when my kids were little, and I have 5 kids, when they were little and they would get into these little tantrums or get their emotions were just too big, I would always say, let's shake it off, let's shake it off, and go, "Brrr," we'd start doing this. And as big as those emotions were, right? That was just the worst part of their day. Everything was horrible. That kind of reset them, and we'd start giggling and laughing. And I say the same things to my grandkids now. I have 3 little ones under 3. But it's that we're just gonna get out of our heads, and so it does work beautifully, and I think as adults, we forget that. We forget that we can do the same things
Yeah.
when we're having these big emotions. We can just woo, get out of it and start moving around, and I do it without even thinking. When my anxiety gets bad, I have to get up and move around and do all of these things, and then I feel better, and so sometimes we're doing it without even realizing that's in fact what we're doing. So I wanna talk about something that you call I think it's the witch wound. Correct? And it's about embracing your whole feminine force. So tell us a little bit about that and what does it mean and why is it so important for this light worker work that for women?
So I'll start off with light worker. I use that because people who are empaths, people who know they're here on a mission, that's a spiritual term that people identify with, but it's you have this purpose on your heart that you want to give back in whatever way that is. That's how I identify what a light worker is. And as starting a business as a creative, it's a whole nother spiritual and self-help journey that you didn't realize you wanted or needed. And so the imposter syndrome comes up. The fear of being seen comes up. Fill in the blank you didn't realize comes up. And I don't believe I coined this. I've heard other people talking about it, but the witch wounds are those visibility, that part of you that's, ooh, am I qualified? Is that the imposter syndrome? Or do I know what I'm talking about? I'm afraid of being truly seen or found out. I'm afraid of what people are going to think of me. So think about which trials back in the day, just for being in your own power, just for using herbs, if you will, getting persecuted for being themselves. Today, my take on the witch, yes, I'm very witchy in that sense, but the word witch is an acronym for a woman in total control of herself. And this doesn't mean that we negate or stuff down or ignore our emotions. What this means is what we've been talking about this whole episode is learning to work with those emotions. Don't resist the emotions and command your focus in the moment so we can harness that anxiety. We can harness the confusion or the imposter syndrome or whatever is coming up in order to move towards our success. And it's always, I'm just like, everything is happening for us. And it surprises me sometimes, and it shouldn't, that whatever that negative emotion is coming up is actually here guiding you towards that next piece of the puzzle that you need, the next step in your journey, that nugget of wisdom, that solution that you've been looking for. But when we just continually judge and perpetuate whatever that negative feeling is, we're holding ourselves back from actually growing, but that next part of our own success and our journey. And so the witch wounds, tying that all back together, is things that come up that you're keeping yourself from truly being who you know you already are because these different fears are coming up about being seen, about speaking your truth. And another great acronym, because it's an easy way to remember things, fear. There's multiple different acronyms for fear, but false evidence appearing real. And sometimes it feels real, like real evidence appearing real, right? When you're in the middle of a panic attack, in those moments of fear, that's where becoming the witch really isn't important because you're training yourself, no matter what is happening internally or externally, whether cold plunge or not, you're able to focus, you're able to use that energy for good. You're able to use that energy. I attune it to being that spiritual warrior. And the same thing with the witch wounds. Those are opportunities, the imposter syndrome, the fear of being seen, not wanting to share your story because you feel like you haven't healed enough yet, or you're not at that finished result. I hear that a lot. Is an opportunity. Those are coming up for you to look at, to be seen, to feel, but to know that it's just like that anxiety coming up for you, just like the cold plunge, for you to learn to work with that energy in order to see a different part of you and really remember how awesome and powerful and wonderful you already are.
Yes, I think that's so hard for people when I know when I've gone out in the world and I've wanted to share things, you do feel very vulnerable and you're sharing in hopes of maybe inspiring or helping other people. But there's that fear deep inside that, okay, I don't have it as together as people may think I do. And then you recognize when you start having some of these conversations that most of us don't have it together. It's that fear has a way of just having a chokehold on us. And we have so much to share in the world, whether it's something we've created or something, the story we want to tell. And it's very difficult to get out of our own way with it and to not let that fear keep us sidelined. It really is. And so what are some of the ways or the practices that we can utilize some of the work that you're doing to be able to get out of the way for
Yeah.
ourselves because it can control us so much.
Yeah, and I think first, before we dive into that, just to underline this part, the reason why that fear is coming up and self sabotage and the witch wounds, whatever you want to call it, is really because we're moving outside that comfort zone. Our sense of self, our ego is just trying to protect us. It's danger, Will Robinson. You're just,
Yeah.
you're outside of that comfort zone. That in and of itself warrants a beautiful reframe for each of us when we feel a fear or the anxiety or whatever's coming up. You're like, oh, this is coming up because I am growing. I am changing. So that's a first reframe. A lot of this working with our body, but also huge reframe on our emotions and what's actually coming up for us. Because if we're continually judging ourselves for feeling certain ways, the more we resist that, the more it will definitely persist. Um, and I think for me, working with awesome, amazing, very successful women who are still struggling with sharing that story. And I think how I want to answer your question is no matter if you feel like you're in that messy middle, remember where you're at now, who you are now is remarkable for the people that you want to work with, and inspiring and empowering for the people that need to hear your message. So a way for me when I feel like I want to hide or not share my message is to tune into myself 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, and just remember how much different I am now. But what does she need to hear? What do I need? Hindsight's 2020. So how could I tell her now what she didn't know then? And that is the authenticity of you sharing where you're at now, even if, oh, but all these people are sharing about their $5 million business and I've only made $5. Who am I to share my work? Yourself a year ago would be so happy to hear about how did you finally make your first $5 in your business. And so it's a really huge perspective flip when that fear comes up. Remember how much you've already grown. Remember the remarkable things you've already done and who you already are. And that's a huge muscle to grow. If in the moment when we're anxious and that fear comes up, yes, the breath work and the somatic practices are so powerful. And equally, it's about what we're thinking and who we are being proactively. So if we're continually living our life from this negative point of view, this fear point of view, the anxiety is going to persist. If we're trying to control everything, the fear and the anxiety is going to persist. But if we can continually start to practice to remind ourselves of how much work we've already done, that's where you're going to feel the momentum shift and you're going to start looking at fear and your anxiety and every single thing in your life differently. And an easy practice that everybody can do listening to this is just for the next week or the next few days, before you go to bed, on your phone or in your journal, write down your wins for the day. It can be something very small and it can be like, oh, I was on the verge of snapping at my children, but I caught myself or something like that. It can be like, hey, I realized I was in this negative loop in the middle or after I was in this negative spiral. It can be like, hey, I took the 5 minutes before I jumped on a call and went outside and just breathed slowly. Starting to reprogram your mind and how you focus towards the positive side. Because as a fellow anxious person, perfectionist, and over controller, I understand it's like we think we're going to find that safety and that security from controlling everything, but it's actually the opposite. And one little side story I want to share, and this is part of sharing your vulnerable story. We've been doing cold plunges for years, years and years. And the first time I actually did a cold plunge, I was so scared, but I ended up doing it for 17 minutes.
Oh, wow.
Because of the breath work, that's all I focused on was breathing, focusing on that. I don't do that long every day, I'll tell you that much. But when we got to where we're at now on the beach, we've never done a cold plunge in the ocean. And I love the ocean. We lived in Florida for years. I love swimming in it. It's so magical. I'm just like, I feel like a mermaid. But for some reason, when we got here, I was terrified, scared out of my mind because there are big waves. It's cold. I couldn't control the waves and I had to go under. They were literally pushing me over. I was trying to fight the waves. And it took me like, I would say a few weeks to really build up the courage to go out there and just dunk my head all the way and go in. But that's the part is there's going to be fear coming up all the time. And we got to learn to retrain ourselves in those moments like, oh, this is an opportunity for me to master myself at this higher level, for me to realize, oh, this part of this control in me is still here wanting to control. So this is an opportunity for me to let go. And that's a beautiful example of how to share your own story as you're going through it, that the authenticity that other people want to hear, they want to know you, they want to hear your energy, your story. Facts don't sell. Stories are that what sell. And that's what I love helping people with in the day to day is like, how do I work through this anxiety or this frustration or imposter syndrome? How is this actually guiding me not only to practice becoming my own witch and regulation in that sense, but also creating stories that sell, creating magnetic content that actually speaks to the people's hearts. It helps me grow my message that I know that's my purpose and why I'm here this lifetime.
And I love that message. It's beautiful when you think about it, when you feel like, what do I have to teach? And sometimes looking back at the older version of yourself, for myself, when I was in my 20s, I had horrific social anxiety as well. And I wanted to be a journalist. I was going to college because I wanted to be this journalist. And one of the reasons I quit school was because I could not speak. I would get in front of people and I would get tongue tied. And a lot of it had to do with what I don't want people to see everything that I've been through. I felt like when they'd look at me, they'd see all of these things. And obviously, I'm far past that now, but it's beautiful to think about that. What would that younger version, what would I tell her to maybe get her there faster? So I just love that message, being able to reflect on how far you've come, because I think people get in their heads too that fear, if I'm feeling fear, I'm not moving forward, I'm not progressing. And the truth of the matter is, and I've learned over all these years, fear is your constant companion. Sometimes it's quiet and it just knows to just walk silently beside you or behind you, but it's still there and it's still going to come up in those moments where you're not ready for it. And you've just got to learn what you need to do to be able to work through it and move beyond it. So I want to talk a little bit about, I was reading a lot of your things and it talked about manifesting your partner. And there was something else. And you can explain it to me because I don't know what it means or what it entails. And quantum leaps during those difficult times. So I know what it means to lean on people that could help you through it. But what is quantum leaps and how does that assist you?
So for me, quantum leap is like when you feel like everything is hitting the fan, if that fear, you get this, you have a cancer diagnosis, like, and you're just thrown, what the F is happening here? Huge things like that, when shifts happen, we were living in Florida and there was a huge hurricane that came through the first year. Like things that are coming through your life that you think are just tragic, right? Those are huge opportunities to propel, to catapult you leaps and bounds more forward towards your success, towards who you already are. faster than you would day to day. Yes, I believe quantum leaps, that can happen as you practice what we just talked about here to really build that momentum. But I also believe that when these things, the contrast of the negative things we think are negative in our life are there in such a big way, like the panic attacks. If I never had a panic attack, who would have known what my journey looked like now, 15 years plus later? I don't know. That quantum leap and propelled me to who I am today. The story of, I think this is what you're referring to, when I received the diagnosis, cancer diagnosis, I went really deep into different breathwork practices, healing practices, and through that, I actually unlocked my spiritual gifts. I've already was very spiritual at that point in my life, but the clairsentient, so I can feel my energy, I can feel other people's energy, but I started to activate that life force energy that runs in all of us. Whether you call it chi or kundalini energy, which is the yogic version, there's just like your chakras that are in your body. You can awaken that life force energy and it's replenishing you. And you don't need to have a spiritual awakening. Those are your emotions. Just need to underline that. Your energy, emotions is literally the word, the etymology of it is energy, in motion. So for me, this huge thing that shook my world upside down is the diagnosis. Through that journey, I was able to quantum leap, unlocking my spiritual gifts, um, learning to work with the energy, clarifying my purpose and who and what I was actually to who I'm supposed to work with, what I'm supposed to do. The confidence is there. Through that, I manifested my partner. He was part of the same healing program that I was in virtually. I'd seen him online, didn't think anything of but him at all. We ended up going to a retreat and met in person. And the moment I saw him, I was like, this is it. I knew my soul once I saw him in person and the synchronicities there. I wasn't focused on that. I was actually in another relationship that was having issues at the time, but it was just like this full blown, oh my gosh, the level of quantum leap is like mind, body, soul partnership. I ended up moving across the country at that point too. Um, from just this quote unquote bad thing that happened to me. Because I used that energy, harnessed all of that energy to create. And, to this day, yes, it's been a beautiful journey, and every single day is about that. The quantum leap is something that we can harness in those times of hard times, but it's mostly important of who we're being every single day and not letting ourselves stay in that perpetual state of fear or stress or I don't feel good enough. But it's when we can build that momentum no matter what's happening, no matter if there's a diagnosis or you lose your job, these beautiful, miraculous things can happen in our lives, these huge synchronicities where you it got to a point where I'm like, my mind can't make this up. Like all the things that are happening, my partner's middle name is Loren, Loren. Who could have made that? The synchronicities, our birthdays are palindromes, the numbers. I'm a big numbers person. So it's like all of these things that were leading me just from this cancer diagnosis, this pre-cancer diagnosis, was like my inner being, God, source, whatever you want to call it, was like, Loren, there's all this beautiful goodness right here waiting for you. But you need to look at yourself and your life and how you're approaching things in a different way. And energy can't be created or destroyed. It just shifts states of being. Quantum leap, that's how I think about it. I mean,
I am a believer in that. I met my husband when I was young, when I was 19, but some of the same things. We sat across from each other, and besides being attracted to one another, our first conversation, we learned our grandmothers were both born on Christmas Day. Our grandfathers were both Wilbert Jean and William Jean. Our brothers were both named Brian Keith. We had all of these similarities. They were big Steelers fan, and my grandfather had told me years before, don't worry, someday you're going to find somebody and they're going to take it take you away from this and you'll just know. And one of the first discussions we were having was how much he loved the Steelers. And my grandfather was a huge Steeler fan in Southeast Louisiana, which you don't see a whole lot, right? So there was all of these things we sat there and talking about. And there was just so many similarities that it was just, yeah, something went off. And it's, okay, the universe, something, God, whatever you may think it is telling me something, because there's all of these things, all of these little signs. So I truly believe in that. And I know one of your big leaps, I think, was starting your own podcast, The Sovereign Self Show. And you have really had global success with it. So for one, I'd love to know what inspired you to start it, and what are some of the most impactful moments that you've been able to experience as a host?
Oh my gosh. Oh, so first of all, it's so funny because you leave certain things out of your story and you just forget to share about it. But I started it right after my divorce hearing, 2017, I believe, 2018. And because I knew that, just like we were talking about today, I needed to share my story. I still was scared. Like, it was my baby steps into really stepping up. And I felt so much inspiration and healing from other podcasts that I knew I had to share that and create a platform for other people to share their own healing journeys and how they help the world. And we all start somewhere. Okay. It took me over 2 hours to record my first episode, which was 15 minutes. This is, you know, way before the days of AI or anything like that. I'm on my computer, just every word editing. Oh my, re-recording this because I was so nervous. I didn't know what I was doing, all of this stuff. And the original name for the podcast, up until about a year and a half ago, was actually called Witchy Wellness Radio, based on what we talked about today. And I was a health coach at that time. So that really was like the holistic, more physical approach to life. And over the years, I realized it wasn't in alignment anymore. So about a year and a half ago, probably more, 2 years ago, it wasn't fun. I was dreading doing it. It was like work. Oh, I have to edit. I have to do this. And I was like, I need to take a look back because clearly I'm not keeping up with my own growth here. And at that point, I'd grown it to a top 2% podcast of all podcasts out there. And I was like, well,
Incredible.
why am I doing this? Is it because for other people, because I've gained this success or whatever? And I was like, no, I've grown. And the beginning of my journey and my listeners' journeys, this is what the most impactful thing for me is I started hearing from beautiful women reaching out to me saying, just left and right, hey, your podcast was such an inspiration, helped me through such a dark time for me in my life. And that inspired me to go create my own healing business, whether it's a health coach, a healer, a yoga teacher, whatever their modality is. And now I'm having some of those people on my podcast now that have gone through this whole journey with me. They've grown, I've grown. So I knew that it was time to switch up what I was doing. I was already doing it in my own business, but the podcast needed to update as well into the Sovereign Self Show. And the word sovereign is such a beautiful part of my journey the past few years, post quantum leap of everything we just talked about, is really the divine right to rule your life. It's everybody is a creator of their reality. And that's when I talk about becoming that witch, is really understanding that we do create our lives. Everything is happening for us. And how do we continually doing that after our healing journey as we show up in the world of wanting to give back and help other people? It's like this restart again into your own sovereignty, and all these things are coming up for us to heal. So I would say the biggest thing that I just delight in is hearing back from people and their experiences, that the guests I have on, the podcasts that I produce and share, are helping them. And now it's like they're moving along on their journey as well. That lights my soul up so much because I know that's my mission, is to help people get out of that victim, that wounded healer era. We have this societal conditioning, a belief that healers and these spiritual people have to be broke and wounded and meek. That there's nothing further from the truth. Like, you're here to make a massive impact and make a massive income, to be able to afford to do what you want to do, to be able to travel, to be able to eat the organic foods, go to the spa and be your full self so you can be a bigger service into the world. And I know that's my mission. And it's just been such a beautiful honor and growth experience for me over the years. As you can tell, I could talk for hours and hours now, but that was not the case. So to end all,
It's beautiful when you can listen to somebody who's very passionate
yeah,
about what they're speaking about, because you can have long conversations and they can drone on and nobody really knows what you're really discussing. But to see someone so passionate about it, and I think that's probably the ultimate feeling we all want to achieve, that
yes.
through our healing, we can help others heal. And that is such a beautiful thing to be able to accomplish, I think. And one of the things you do offer some resources as well. And you have one called, I think, is the Purpose Activation Bundle.
Yeah.
And it's to help empaths embody success without the burnout. So can you tell us about it and how listeners can find it and how it maybe can help them?
Yeah, so it's an amazing value. Like I just said, my mission here is to be a massive impact to everybody. And this whole bundle is 13 of my best trainings and courses for $13, which is like literally crazy, I know. But everything we talk about here, there's different master classes on all these different specific things we talked about to help you start to practice being that leader of your life, being the witch of your life. And I'm sure everything will be linked in the show notes, but it's really here if you're ready to take those next steps, if you want to learn the practical tools, if you want to understand more of what we're talking about here today, that is your next step. I think, yes, I have so many other goody things that I'm working through, but this working on that I want to share with you guys, but that's a great place to start to really deep dive into this world if you're brand new or if you're a seasoned veteran into the spiritual world. It's a good helping you do the deep dive to reframe everything that we talked about today.
Thank you. And so as we head out and as we close out, where can they connect with you? And yes, we'll have all of this in our show notes as well. And also, if you want to leave our listeners with one thing, one powerful thing, what would that be?
You can find me, obviously, my podcast, Sovereign Self Show, on all podcast platforms and on YouTube now, and on Instagram mostly is where I hang out at Loren Cellentani. And your body is not in the way, it's always leading the way. That's the thing that I'm always going to leave the world with, because you can listen to everything I say today, everything Steffi and I shared today. But if you aren't willing to listen and work with your body, then none of this is going to stick. You have all the answers inside of you. You have all the codes and the wisdom and the ideas and creativity ready to burst out into the world. And that comes from you, not anybody outside of you.
I want to thank you so much. I appreciate you sharing your story with us today and your light. It's just been amazing to hear how you went from being totally burnt out, which is where so many people are, and being able to have and being empowered and have the testament of this transformative power of the somatic work. And I think a lot of people really need to learn how their bodies can help us either move us forward or keep us stuck. And so I thank you so much for sharing it with us today. And to our listeners, if you're ready to embrace your purpose and harness that power, please connect with Loren at her website. I'll have that on our show notes. And don't forget to check out her Purpose Activation Bundle and follow her on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube, correct, for daily inspiration. And remember, as her story shows, your body isn't in the way, it's leading the way. Step into your next chapter with confidence. And until next time, I am encouraging you to embrace your story and to write the next chapter of your life with intention. Remember, your story isn't over. It's just waiting for you to turn the page. Thank you for joining us. And if today's episode inspired you, I would love for you to subscribe and leave us a review. It'll help more people find the show and reminds us all that it's never too late to begin again. And if you're ready to step into your next chapter, you don't have to do it alone. Keep writing, keep dreaming, and most of all, keep believing. Until next time, this is Unfinished Stories Next Chapter, because the best stories are the ones that we're brave enough to finish.